Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Story of Plastic panel discussion presented by Green Action Centre and Greenpeace Winnipeg. My name is Jane Roussak, and I'll be your host this evening. Thank you for joining us, demonstrating your interest in learning more about the issue of plastics and how we can fight to break free from plastic. As you may already know, this event is taking place during Plastic Free July, a global movement towards a world without plastic waste. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the campaign, which challenges people to think about the plastic they use in their lives and take action to reduce it. So whether you're at home, work, school, or in the community, I find this is a great time to reflect on the plastic usage, and there are tons of actionable ways to avoid single-use plastics, as well as some great reusable alternatives. So if you'd like to learn more about how you can reduce your plastic waste, you can visit greenactioncentre.ca/plasticfreejuly or check out plasticfreejuly.com. Now, before we dive into the discussion, I would like to acknowledge that the majority of us here are digitally gathering on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene peoples, and homeland of the Métis Nation. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists now. Starting with Sarah King. Sarah King is the head of Greenpeace Canada's Oceans and Plastics campaign, based in Vancouver on unceded Coast Salish territories. For 13 years, Sarah has channeled her passion for environmental justice and protection into campaigns that tackle some of the biggest threats to ocean biodiversity and coastal communities. So this includes overfishing, plastic pollution, and the climate crisis. She seeks to change broken systems and help create a green, just, and zero waste future, starting by changing the conversation. You can follow Sarah on Twitter and Instagram at SC Kinger. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, happy to have you. Now, we'll move on to our next panelist. We have Joseph Chaeban. So Joseph Chaeban is a second-generation dairy expert who specializes in cheese and yogurt. Ice cream wasn't his focus until 2016, when his wife, Zainab Ali, needed to help her family escape the Syrian war. Joseph, along with the South Osborne community, were able to raise enough money to get 13 of her family members to safety in Winnipeg. So as a thank you to the community, Chaeban Ice Cream was born. With a focus on using locally grown, all-natural ingredients and reducing their environmental footprint through a reusable glass pint return program, Chaeban became a Winnipeg favorite year-round. Thank you for joining us, Joseph.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
And last but not least, we've got Brittany Guarino. So Brittany studies anthropology at the University of Manitoba. In her free time, she pursues her passion for sustainability by organizing community cleanups. In 2018, Brittany took part in conservation work in Auckland, New Zealand, which included planting trees, removing invasive fauna, and picking up litter. When she returned home, she wanted to apply her knowledge to tackle Manitoba's pollution problem head-on. Since then, she has organized a multitude of campus and Transcona neighborhood cleanups and has become an executive of an environmental campus group called Earth. Currently, you can find Brittany working for the Transcona Biz Green team. You can follow Brittany's cleanup efforts and sustainability efforts on Instagram at serendipity.eco. Thank you for being here, Brittany.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on the panel.
So excited to have all three panelists here, providing a different viewpoint and coming from different backgrounds. So as you see, we have somebody from the business community, we have somebody working in campaigning and activism, and we have a student who is taking action herself. So really inspiring as a group of three panelists. All right, so without further ado, let's get the discussion rolling. For the audience, I'll let you know we have a number of preset questions to stimulate discussion. We'll also take time to answer some live audience questions. You can submit a question in the Q&A function, which is found in the control panel of Zoom. Just please specify if your question is for a specific panelist or for the panel in general. If you see a question you like, feel free to express your interest by clicking upvote. So this is similar to the Facebook like function. The most upvoted questions we can make sure we can address. So we'll try our best to get through as many of the questions we can, time permitting, of course. All right, so for the first question, we'll have all panelists go through answering. So in your introductions, I lightly touched on some of the work you folks are doing to address the issue of plastic waste. Can you elaborate on what you're doing, so as an individual, business, or organization, to reduce your impact? I'll start with Joseph.
So at Chaeban Ice Cream, it was very important for us to start with core values before we open our store. And we picked like 5 core values that we really wanted to maintain and lead by. One of them was environment. And we said, okay, how are we going to package our product? We looked at plastic containers that say that they're recyclable. We looked at biodegradable containers or even cardboard. But now we said, okay, how many people are really recycling these products? So we kept searching, and then we found a company out in Vancouver. They're called Ernest Ice Cream. And they were doing the reusable glass jars, where they would encourage their customers, if they bring their glass jars, they'll give them $1. So we reached out to them and we said to them, listen, we love your business model. Do you think we can use this reusable glass jar? And they were like, yes, this is the whole point of us doing this. We want to lead by example, and we followed, and we hope that we lead someone also by example. So one thing we're doing in a business aspect is, okay, how do we encourage customers to recycle or reuse the product? So we do the same thing. We say, okay, if you return the glass jar to us, we'll give you $1. And it's actually, it costs us less to rebuy the glass jar and also label it than give them $1. But we think, okay, this is very important to us. So we have to lead by example wherever we are. Even though we're taking a little bit of loss, at least we're trying to do our part. This is one aspect of our business. Another aspect is, right now we launched an ice cream subscription. So we wanted to get our own drivers to deliver the ice cream, so it's more of a genuine feel. Then we were like, how do we implement our core values into the system? So we hired, or rehired, we can say, one of our staff members, and she lives in our community. We said, okay, whatever's close enough to our store, we can actually deliver with a bike. So we put ice cream on a bicycle with a cooler and dry ice, and she goes around the community and deliver the ice cream. And this is very important to us. Even though it costs us more, obviously, because she's not taking as much ice cream, but it holds us true to our values, and it's very important. And we find with our customers, the people who do care, it's like above and beyond service where they notice that. And that's what we really love about it, is people are noticing it, and it encourages us to keep going, because sometimes cost is a big factor. But if your values are environment, we try as much as you can to implement it into your business, and that's what we're trying to do. Maybe I give you too much detail, but
No, that's great, Joseph. And I feel like every time I talk to you, I learn something new about the business that I really admire.
Well,
So
thank
I
you so
think
much. Thank you.
from a customer point of view, when you find local businesses who align with your values and the things you appreciate, that's when you want to put your dollar where your mouth is. That's where you want to support them.
Oh,
So I know that it's been challenging too, given COVID and a lot of uncertainty, but I think because of these values, people really wanted to keep you guys afloat.
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and conveniently enough, I was telling the panelists before we started today, I just ran my dishwasher before the panel and I was running low on glassware, so I do have one of the Chaeban jars that I'm using for water today. So cheers to you. Brittany, would you like to discuss your initiatives next?
Yeah, sure. All right. So, hi, I'm Brittany. I've already been introduced, but I felt like saying hi again. But in my free time, I organize community cleanups. That's something I've been doing for 2 years now. How I started is a little complicated. I was doing volunteer work in Auckland, New Zealand. I was planting trees, and eventually I started to see how much waste, how much pollution was happening in general. I really had my wake up call, I think, a year after I started picking up waste. That sounds a little weird, right? But I was always able to pick up trash in a state where it was completely together. I never saw it, I guess, in a state where it was outside of like prairie grass. So like most times it was together. But then when I was in Auckland, New Zealand the next year again, I decided to go clean some mangroves with a company called Sea Cleaners New Zealand. And I was in the bush. I was in an island, a small little island in the Auckland harbor. And that's when I saw it, these massive patches of microplastic. And coming from like flatlands where there's no water really around us, it was really shocking to see something like that. Like seeing our impact up close really like kicked me into gear and said, okay, I really need to ramp up my actions here and I need to start acting before it becomes so small where you take hours to pick something up. And so what I've done since then is I've organized campus cleanups. I've been picking up trash every day, so it might be like me like walking for 8 miles or something like that. Keeps me going, it's a little bit of exercise, so I'm really fit now. um, since I'm in anthropology too, I take archaeology classes, so I'm able to date these things and like write a data log and kind of use like a data sheet to see how much garbage I'm picking up on average every day. And then I'm hoping to take that and apply it to other neighborhoods, not just within Transcona or in my suburb, but hopefully in other places in Winnipeg to see what kind of difference or what kind of situation is creating that plastic and why where I'm living is different in contrast to somewhere else in the city. And hopefully I can write my master's paper on that. And I think by doing this and by cleaning up trash, it's really rewarding and satisfying, and there's nothing else like it because you can see your work right in front of you. You can see it like firsthand, what you're doing. And that's why I pick up trash. I pick up trash because I know it matters. I know that down the line, like, hey, I'm not seeing like what it's doing right now, but I can see what it can end up like, So that's why I pick up trash. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing, Brittany.
Yeah, no worries.
And I think too, with microplastics being kind of the final product, it's something that can no longer be taken out of the environment. There are certainly scientists working on trying to find a way to filter our oceans and streams, but really, once it's out there, you can't see it, you don't realize it's there, but it does enter our food system, it enters our bodies. Scientists are now finding microplastics in the air, which to me is just mind-blowing, but in a terrible way. So it's so great that you're able to at least take that out of the environment before it becomes a bigger issue, one that we can't handle, not yet. So lastly, Sarah, would you like to discuss a little bit about your work?
Sure, sounds great. Yeah, and I also just want to say that, Joseph, I have Earnest ice cream in my freezer right now. So it's just down the street from my house. So I'm very familiar with them. So that's cool that you've been in touch with them around your initiative. Yeah, so Greenpeace Canada, I guess just to start by, we often get asked actually, you know, like how as an organization we work to reduce our ecological footprint. And I guess I just wanted to say that, you know, I think a lot of people have expectations that we have it covered, you know, we have all of the green answers, but there, you know, I think as we've all come to realize, like operating in this linear make waste economic system, despite best efforts, you know, it's really hard to dodge plastic and to find more sustainable alternatives in a lot of cases. So, you know, we're always striving to do better, and we have an internal sustainability policy, and we try to, you know, avoid plastic and waste generation and all of the things that so many of us are also trying to do on an individual basis. But it really is about the system and how we can work to change that. And so as an organization, Greenpeace is part of the global Break Free from Plastic movement. And we work alongside a lot of the folks that were actually featured in the film to essentially try to stop plastic pollution and waste generation at the source. We have really been focused on pushing those major fast-moving consumer goods companies, the Nestle's and Cokes and Unilevers and Procter and Gamble's of the world, to essentially, you know, transition away from their reliance on single-use plastics and push them to invest in more sustainable, circular business models. And, you know, we've done kind of cleanup 2.0s where we've done big brand audits to look at, you know, connect the companies to the pollution that we're finding in our communities, we're finding on our shorelines. So we've done a lot to sort of expose the big players in Canada, none of which will probably come as a shock to most folks. You know, Tim Hortons, Starbucks, Coke, Pepsi, those folks, those companies are major contributors. And then we're also trying to actually, you know, legislate meaningful change. So we're calling on the federal government to put a ban in place, ultimately working towards a ban on all non-essential plastics, but starting with the most problematic and unnecessary. So those are the ones that are like ending up regularly in the environment that we're seeing in our communities, that despite recyclability claims are still going to landfill. And that we know already have alternatives, they already have reusable alternatives. So those are the real, it's a really big group actually, you know, it's all the usual suspects that we would think of: cups, straws, packaging, all of the things that we would assume. It's a long list, and so we're really trying to push the federal government and all levels of government really to come together and work towards a ban, and then invest in these more circular models so that we can move in the direction that we need to go, which is towards a circular economy and a green and just future, essentially. So yeah, you know, there's lots of different angles of our global campaigns, but it really is focused on trying to ultimately address this issue of source reduction, and then also change the story that the industry has been telling us for decades. And yeah, and shift the narrative around this issue, and have people really feel empowered to participate in the reuse revolution that is happening all around us, and all of the amazing ways that we are seeing the types of models that we want to support, like some of the ones that you know, have been mentioned here. So yeah, that's essentially our work in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Yeah, Greenpeace is taking on a lot. It's a big job that they're doing. And smaller groups such as Green Action Center, who I happen to work for, we do obviously try to pick up some of that slack, but on a smaller scale. So Green Action Center does operate just within Manitoba, whereas Greenpeace, as far as I know, is international, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving on to the next question. This is also going to go out to all the panelists. Perhaps I'll do the same order again. So what or who inspires you to take action? Joseph, I believe you're the first.
Yes. So again, it just starts with our core values. I strongly believe before we open our store, we have to have values and we have to implement them. And again, when we started with environment, I'm just saying one of 5 that we have is what can we do? And we try our best. Like everything in our store is either compostable or recyclable. And it took us a while to get a compost company and find one. It's like impossible here in Winnipeg, but we finally got one. And it's amazing what you can compost. That's very encouraging. Just being more aware of what is compostable, what is not. This month of Environment Month is really well because just the other day I got a recycling bin at my front door out of nowhere. So, and then it shows, they gave you like a list of what you can recycle and what you cannot, and how to recycle it as well. So the main question was who inspired us was it's ourselves, number one, and then other companies, what they're doing as well to get the example. Because sometimes we do need help is like, how do we go forward? And you just research, and there are great companies out there where they're doing their part. Like an example, it was Ernest in Vancouver that gave us the inspiration of the glass jars. And if we can take a little bit from different companies and what they're doing and do our part is phenomenal, because our main thing is we want to help the environment. And hopefully people like Sarah and Brittany and yourself can inspire us and give us examples on how to go forward with this. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. Brittany, I know you've already touched a little bit on the inspiration behind why you initiate cleanups, but I have a feeling that you may have more to add.
Yeah, I certainly do. So initially I did have like a specific person that inspired me. Her name is Sam. I met her when I was tree planting in New Zealand. She was the team project leader. We were sitting in the car and I was asking her, hey, how did you get into conservation work? Asking her how she got into her job in general. And she said something to me that I couldn't quite get out of my head. And, it kind of got to me. Eventually I thought, wow, okay. What she said was, when you're working a job like I do, you can't really unsee everything. You start to notice everything. It might be just one small little thing, but it all adds up. And then she points up the window to me and she says, do you see that? That's an invasive species. And, she shows me the specific plant. And she's like, do you see all that garbage? Do you see all this? Do you see those birds? Those are invasive birds. All these problems that if I didn't know what they were, I wouldn't have noticed them. I wouldn't have cared. And then after she said that, I couldn't really unsee or go back to how I was living. And then I came here. I came back home. And unlike New Zealand, I'm going to say that we have a lot of things to work on here, and even more things to work on here in Manitoba. Because as soon as I got home, I was ready. I was, going to go for it. And then I looked outside and it was a whole lot worse than I thought, And I started to meet some people at university. They also inspired me to keep on doing what I'm doing. And also myself, I'll say I inspire myself to keep going because, you know, you think it's impossible or it's a really big task, right? And then you do it. You get it out of the way. You pick up like 10 bags of garbage. You clear one area and you say, wow, I did that. I have the power to pick all that up. Even though it took 4 hours, 3 hours, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but you did it. And you know that you yourself, you made an impact, and that goes a really long way. So you have the power as one person to keep on going, do something, even if it's small, you can do it. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And I think that it goes without saying that for all of the panelists here, it might have been a person that inspired them, but there's also something within. And once you start to take that action, then maybe you'll inspire somebody else to do the same, right? Like Sam played clearly a pivotal role for Brittany. And now Brittany is sharing what she's doing with everybody else. And so it's gaining momentum as you go along. So that's phenomenal. Sarah, would you like to discuss about what or who inspires you?
Sure. Yeah, and it really resonated, Brittany, what you said about, you know, not being able to sort of unsee things, and that I'm very much like that, not only on this issue, but so many issues where it's like once I learn something, it sticks there, and it's like, you know, really drives my, you know, desire to act. I mean, there are so many different people and things that inspire me on this issue. Definitely, you know, the young people in my life, and also just the younger generation that are really holding older generations accountable and that are so activated and so inspiring in you know, how they're tackling this and so many of the other major global environmental and social justice issues of today. Also, you know, my love of nature and wildlife, definitely, you know, the millions of other species that we share this planet with, and that they deserve better and that they don't have a voice. They do inspire me to act. And so do, you know, the people in the most impacted communities by this issue. And, you know, those that are living, working in areas that are disproportionately impacted, and many of whom are really, you know, fighting on the front lines, fighting this issue, and somehow managing to like stay inspired also, and you know, keep pushing for the change that we need to see. Yeah, so you know, those definitely are some of the top groups of folks that, yeah, push me to be better and do better on this issue in my work and in my daily life.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I really second the point about the youth. And I don't know if I fit into this category. I personally think I have outgrown it, but really, like, you see kids at the climate strikes, you see kids on the news, you see kids presenting to the UN. It's crazy. But I think there is a voice there that everyone can relate to, everyone resonates with. You know, you can't doubt a child asking for a better future. Yeah. All right. So after the two questions I've asked everybody, everything else to come is going to be on a raise hand basis. So just based on who would like to touch on the topic at hand. So the question is, how might we reimagine a future without single-use plastics? What kinds of policies and systems might we implement, both in our communities and on a wider scale, to help us get there? So I'm waiting for panelists to raise a hand. to start the discussion. Oh, I've got Sarah here. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I think that the situation that we're currently in, with the global pandemic has really brought to light like just how broken our current system is and all the different pieces that are broken, and how that's negatively impacting different communities, different groups, and our planet essentially. So we've heard a lot from a lot of different organizations and different leaders that we do need to be transitioning towards a green and just future. So essentially, like, what does that actually mean? It's like, putting people before profit, this linear system that I mentioned earlier, where we take stuff from nature, we turn it into things, we throw it away, and then we just keep doing that over and over again on repeat, moving away from that destructive waste generating model, and moving more towards a system that doesn't produce waste, that either eliminates or totally reduces pollution, that's regenerative, that's low carbon. And that really, strengthens communities and puts at the forefront the well-being of all people. And a big part of that is cutting our dependency on fossil fuels and fossil fuel byproducts like plastics. And so it's really moving away from our disposal-centric systems and trying to let go of this throwaway culture that we've all been engaging in for so long. So yeah, when we think of what, like, the action that government needs to be taking, I don't know how many folks on the call are familiar with the waste hierarchy, but it's a really good tool to sort of think about when we're thinking about the waste that we're generating. What's kind of like the order of priority and how we tackle a problem when we're thinking, about zero waste or plastic reduction. And sort of the first thing that we need to be doing is rethinking the whole system and, redesigning the way that we're consuming goods or services, that we're getting things from point A to point B, that our communities are set up, that our food system and other systems are organized. So, it's really taking a step back and taking a bird's eye view of what isn't working, and then how do we move it in a different direction that is sort of ticking the boxes of what a more circular model would look like. And I think, as we're thinking through the complexity of that, because that's no small task, there are some simpler things that the government need to be doing now, which is, first and foremost, a ban on non-essential plastics, as I said before, and starting to eliminate some of these toxic and highly polluting materials from production and from our existence. I think that's really where we need to be starting. And as the government is thinking about stimulus packages and where to go from here post-COVID, definitely investment in more sustainable models, ones that do prioritize reuse or refill, and non-waste generating businesses, and community-run operations that, again, where people are being put before profit, and it's regenerative as opposed to just take. So yeah, I think those are some of the things we need to be thinking about.
Wonderful, thanks for sharing. It's like you say, it's no small feat, that's for sure. And the reality is that we do need the policy in place. We need to make sure we're giving the government a good push and saying, hey, this is still important to us, especially in light of COVID. This is a conversation I've had a few times with folks where they're asking me, so what's going to happen? Is the single-use plastics ban still going forward. We were promised a ban in 2021. And I mean, I'm not the person who makes this decision. I'm just someone who keeps an eye out for these things. But unfortunately, we are starting to see the government say, hey, we're going to delay this a little bit. And as citizens, I think it is within our power, surely, and within reach to be writing to our elected officials and saying, we demand that this continues to happen. We demand that this is important to you because it's important to us. And I see Joseph has his hand up, so I'll let you take the floor.
Yes. So one thing that Sarah did mention was the youth, and it's a lot different than when I grew up. I didn't know what's going on with the environment, maybe because of social media. And what I love now with my children, they're always educating me on new things and environment, and I'm finding that they care a lot faster than when I started caring. The thing is, I never knew. And then once I did know, I was grown up and I wasn't raised the way, okay, we got to care about our environment. We got to recycle. And yes, we did do our part, but we didn't realize how effective it's going. Like, I believe it's going to take more time. But with the generations that's growing up right now, they're going to do the most impact by holding us accountable, where I love. It shows great promise to my future and when I become elderly. And I strongly believe once they have kids as well, the second generation after me, they're going to make the most impact, because now my children or people that are growing up that are young are going to be in government and be in powerful situations when they will want to change certain laws, and having their children saying, hey, we got to do this, will be very encouragement, because we got to hold each other accountable for what we do. So this is a great platform what you're doing right now, and the more that is like this out there, the faster it's gonna be done. So you guys are doing a phenomenal job, all of you guys, and I honestly encourage to keep going, because we need to hold each other accountable for what we do. I make mistakes, and if someone was right there beside me to say, hey, just like Brittany, someone showed you, and because you're a caring person, and a lot of us are caring people, we just don't know, and we would start doing our part. That's amazing how you take 4 hours from your own time to do what you're doing. It's unbelievable. And even Sarah to giving us this awareness. We definitely need platforms like this, Jane, and keep going.
Thanks, Joseph. And Brittany has something to add.
Jane, do you just re-saying the question again for me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the question was, how might we reimagine a future without single-use plastics? And what kinds of policies and systems might we implement both in our communities and on a wider scale to help us get there?
Okay. Well, since I'm in anthropology, I'm going to throw a little anthropology into this. I think it's only fair. I'd say we're going to probably have to look at a cultural change here. If we really want to say no to something, it's pretty obvious we can. Like when there was a whole big ban of plastic straws, that was a really big thing. I'm sure we can do it again. And a system we can change within social media. And I know there's tons of activism about, going plastic free, etc. But we also do see a lot of things with ads that say, hey, you should buy this, you know, buying into consumerist culture. And it's just a matter of removing that, like, you know, taking those ads off so we don't see them, or even advocating for low waste things. But there's always the problem of greenwashing. I don't know if many of you know about this, but a lot of companies will just kind of slap on the green sticker and say, hey, we're sustainable. And it all really boils down to making money in the end, which is really unfortunate, rather than caring for our own future. And if we can really just push that aside and say, hey, you know, come collectively together on one issue and say, hey, just moving forward, we should probably abandon this, because we have. I mean, to abandon, you know, cutting down trees, we started going into plastic, and now that we're, you know, saying, hey, plastic is a bad thing, we're going back to wood, which is, you know, still creating really big problems. So it is what Sarah said or mentioned earlier, that if we can learn how to fix our own stuff rather than buying something new, I think we can move forward, you know, generational wise, and teach our, you know, generations upcoming that it's okay to fix something. You don't necessarily have to buy something new because it's broken. So that's my little saying on that.
Yeah, I guess to add to what Brittany is discussing, there certainly is the push of unnecessary buying and just a very, very quick linear cycle of how we consume. And so to be adjusting our focus from having more stuff to looking at, you know, things that are durable again, that are actually reflecting the cost of the item or product, as opposed to having all these underlying costs where we're paying with our health, we're paying with the environment, and their adverse effects to, you know, groups who are already vulnerable. I think to see that kind of shift would be phenomenal. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question. And this one kind of ties into what we were just discussing, with the fact that there are certainly vulnerable communities who are taking a hit because of the plastic crisis, I'm going to call it. So the film reveals the links between the plastics crisis and other pressing issues: climate, human health, environmental justice, and the global waste trade, among others. What are your reflections on these intersections, and which communities are affected most? And this, once again, is by a raise hand basis. So far we don't have any panelists raising hands, so perhaps maybe I'll get us going by mentioning that, oh, Sarah, I see. I still will finish my thought. I'll get us going by mentioning the big surge in intersectional environmentalism. So for those who don't know, it's basically looking at environmentalism from multiple sectors or multiple perspectives, demonstrating that we're no longer just looking at environmental justice, because it's not just an environmental issue. It's also an issue of, you know, people who are vulnerable populations, such as the BIPOC community. It's an issue of the way that we've built consumerism and the whole cycle. It's an issue of, you know, the developed countries versus developing countries. So there's just so much more to it than just the environment. Sarah, did you want to elaborate more?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really nailed it there. And it, you know, unfortunately, it is sort of the same communities that are negatively impacted by so many different problems that our broken system creates. And all, you know, whether it is a climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the plastic pollution crisis, all the oceans crises, all the different crises that are going on, and that's not even touching on all of the different social justice also crises that we are currently facing in all corners of the world. Yeah, and it is usually lower income, vulnerable, marginalized communities that are suffering the brunt of the negative consequences that are often perpetrated by companies in the global north. And I think the film does a really great job of showing that this narrative that the industry tries to put out there, I would say for particularly in Canada and North America and Europe, that it's an over there problem, that the pollution and the waste problem in Canada isn't that significant. It's really it's over there, and those are the countries that are contributing to plastic pollution and all of these issues. It is the companies in the global north that are pushing unsustainable, socially unjust models into those communities, and perpetuating existing issues, say around ability to deal with waste, and that amplify other issues around inequality and pollution, etc. So yeah, I mean, I think COVID's been really interesting to kind of highlight the interconnectedness of so many different issues, and I really liked how this film exposes how plastic, this thing that we hold in our hand and that we have around our tomatoes, how really it has such a complex and destructive story behind it, from extraction to disposal, or when it comes pollution. I really liked how the film kind of brought all those different pieces together and starts to, elevate the voices of the people that are the most impacted by this issue.
Thanks, Sarah. I completely agree. I feel like there was phenomenal representation of different communities telling their stories within this documentary. And I guess to wrap up this question, I'm just going to add the fact that, and something that's come to light with the intersectional environmentalism movement, is that you can't handle the climate crisis, you can't handle the environmental crisis or the plastic crisis if you're not addressing the other injustices. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the next question. This one will touch on a little bit by popular demand. So corporations, including the oil and gas industries and food and beverage and consumer goods, retail industries, and so forth, have been pushing pro-plastics narratives for decades. Can you think of examples of this type of false narrative that they're perpetuating? And what pro-plastic narratives do you notice around you in the world today? So we've talked a little bit about greenwashing, but I think this is even more specific to the plastics industry. So by a raised hand basis, is there somebody who wants to get us started? We've got silence. Oh, Brittany's speaking up. Go ahead, take the floor, Brittany.
Okay, so in regards to COVID, I'm sure all of you've noticed that we've suddenly started consuming a lot more PPE. I've been picking up a lot of PPE, and sometimes I'll find clusters of it in massive, like, people are just stuffing plastic gloves inside plastic gloves and dumping them in the ditches. It's really frustrating to see that. But companies, so oil companies are making a lot of money off of this PPE crisis because there's a big demand for PPE now. And even when I was talking to a local politician, he was stating that it's necessary to actually have plastic now. And, he was arguing me a little bit, and, to touch on that again, I just think that's a really big thing that everyone sees, but no one really thinks of because it's a necessary thing now, or it's branded as necessary. But, you know, we see people using cloth masks now, and people have been using their own gloves, for example. And that's another way people have been combating that. But also plastic packaging now is very necessary in grocery stores, right? Or hand sanitizers, people are buying them by the bottles now. It's just something we haven't even seen. So like one behavior, in my opinion, is just replacing another. Yeah.
Joseph, would you like to add to this?
No, like for food and beverage, like the only way we can do our part is plastic obviously costs us money and cups cost us money. So like for us, if someone brings in like the jar thing and we give them $1 back, for say coffee, because we serve coffee, if they bring their own canister, we'll give them 75 cents off. We can encourage our consumers by doing such things, and we just need more of it. It could be dealt with, but it has to be more awareness on, okay, well, how can we do this? Which companies are involved in this program, and having consumers that really care get involved. And that way, because once a movement starts, it's going to snowball. But sometimes it starts slow and it might take years, but at least if we start somewhere, eventually we'll get there. So in the business aspect is just having more companies getting on board on reusing the same product, or having your customers maybe bring in their own plate or bring in their own spoons, and then we'll give them whatever it is off, 50 cents off or $1 off. And for me, I don't mind someone bringing their own cup or their own plate, and we really want to encourage that, and we would reward them at the same time. And so if we can do it, we can obviously other companies can do it. And that's why, for example, when we do taste testings, we do it in a spoon, where we don't throw out the spoon, we'll go and put it in the dishwasher and clean it and reuse it and keep going. Certain things like that, it's going to cost us a little bit more, but for people that care, those become our true customers, and that's very important for us. And having companies being aware that people do care will help their company, not ruin their company or destroy their company. People are willing to pay more as long as it's done properly and there is an outcome behind this, like environment as an example. So yeah, it's just more awareness and more incentives on, maybe it comes from the government where they'll help that company if they're implementing these new things. Instead of charging 5 cents extra a bag, like, no, if they use their own bag, we can give that 5 cents to that customer, or stuff like this would definitely help.
Yeah, I appreciate how Joseph took the question and kind of reversed it. So as opposed to talking about the pro-plastics narrative, he was really talking about the incentives that companies can provide to the clients, which I think is fantastic. And the more that we have these types of incentives become a norm, I think the more widely they're going to be implemented. Yeah. Sarah, did you want to add something to this question?
Yeah, sure. We've definitely seen, actually, even in the form of kind of a concerted efforts around op-eds, opinion editorials in different well-known newspapers across the country, that the plastic industry has been kind of putting out there their usual key talking points that they, you know, have been on for many years, but really have used this moment of COVID to kind of ramp up messaging around some of the key ones that they tend to focus on. And hygiene, and Brittany touched on this a bit, hygiene is a big one, you know, that plastic helps ensure that products are, you know, safe, free of contamination, and that we need plastic in order to get our goods in a safe and hygienic way. But that's not based on science. The science that has come out around COVID on surfaces, for example, showed that it actually stays on plastic like in terms of different types of surfaces. Plastic is one of the surfaces that it remains the longest on. But I would say more importantly, we just recently, in collaboration with Upstream, which is another organization that's part of the Global Breakthrough from Plastic movement, worked to get a number of physicians, scientists, public health experts, we got over 125 from 19 different countries, sign on to a statement that basically is meant to assure customers and the public and businesses that reusables, when basic hygiene measures are employed, are totally safe to be using during COVID, and that plastic actually isn't inherently more sanitary or more hygienic. And so really just trying to dispel this myth that plastic is totally necessary in this context. And there are also some really great business models, you know, that have continued to operate, zero waste businesses that have continued to operate during COVID. It's because their whole business model was created to ensure proper sanitation, but just in a totally non-disposable reliant way, disposable reliant way. So that is a big one that I would say the industry really pushes. Also this idea that using plastic as packaging reduces the carbon footprint. They talk about lightweighting a lot, and how, you know, they can, it's so much less of a carbon footprint compared to other materials like glass, etc. But often those estimates aren't taking into consideration the full extraction to disposal carbon footprint, or the fact that these products are being shipped, you know, around the world. You know, it also doesn't take into consideration, if we adjust our food systems or product delivery systems or models, that you address a lot of those issues. So it's really, really misleading and confusing for the public. And as I touched on in another response, another big one that they often, the false narrative is just that it isn't like a problem in Canada, it's a problem elsewhere, you know, and that you know, we don't really have that much pollution here, or that we totally have the infrastructure to address our waste. And if we just recycle better, and if people stop littering, then we'll be totally fine. You know, it's all the consumers' fault if they would just engage better and dispose of things properly. But as we all know, despite best efforts by people to dispose of things properly and dodge plastic, we just can't do it. So, or we can't do it on the scale that mirrors the extent of the problem. So yeah, I would say that those are some of the big ones, that recycling is going to save the day, even though less than 9% of plastic is recycled. Yeah, it's a common one, but at least I think we're gaining traction in dispelling some of those myths.
The 9% statistic is a scary statistic. And then to add to that, as the documentary showed us, anytime you're recycling plastic, you're downgrading it. It's very, very rare. I think something along the lines of 14% that is actually being put through the recycling stream. 14% of that 9% that's being recycled, I should specify, that's actually being used to produce a product that's equivalent to what it was in its prior life. And everything else is just getting into poorer and poorer quality, and then you're not recycling that. So Sarah did touch on a couple of the audience questions that are coming in through the Q&A. One of them was addressed to Joseph specifically, but it did mention the fact that that there is concern surrounding reusables at this time in the business sector, and why is plastic being chosen as the more sanitary approach. And I think Sarah was able to address that with enough scientific evidence and background as to the fact that you can have those alternatives in a business just as long as you're washing and sanitizing properly. Yeah, so thanks for that. I'll move on to the next question. So this question was actually pre-submitted by an audience member. So Maureen was asking, the documentary ends by suggesting that we take action at the source so that plastic pricing is done at the source to cover its waste costs. The increased costs would then help reduce supply and make other options more affordable or accessible. So what specifically has been done in this regard in Canada, and how can we better support the initiative? And I should add as well, I pulled a quote in from the documentary because this is exactly what Maureen is referring to. It's just at the very end, it says how to truly confront the plastics crisis, and that is to fight to end fossil fuel subsidies and to make companies accountable for the life cycle of their products. So from start to finish. It mentions that the moment that companies such as Shell, Exxon, and so on and so forth own the impact of their products, the crisis will be mitigated. So how do we think we can start to make companies accountable at the source? Sarah?
Yeah, I think what you just pulled from the film is spot on. And I would add to that also that instead of companies, subsidizing fossil fuels, they need to be investing in the alternative models. We've seen, the federal government created an innovation fund that it's meant, like in the context of the national zero waste strategy, zero plastic waste strategy, they have been theoretically trying to encourage innovators to come forward with proposed alternatives to disposable single-use plastics. But what we're seeing is that a lot of what has been funded or proposed are just other disposables. And I think Brittany mentioned this, that it's like just, moving the issue to wood-based alternatives is not where we need to be going. We need to be moving away from disposables as a group, starting with plastics, but also not then giving an interim space for paper-based and other bio-based that are problematic in other ways. And so we really need to see the government investing in the actual reuse, refill, zero waste models and businesses that are totally rethinking the way that they're either delivering goods or services, or that they're part of a larger system, whether it's the food system or otherwise, and play a part in that, and that they're doing their part in a way that's meeting more of a circular model. And that is, that I think is what has largely been missing from the conversation. It's all about, it seems like it's really been all about how do we just keep the same model, but in a different format that eliminates some plastic and reduces some waste, not how do we actually get out of this same model that we've been stuck in for so long that clearly isn't working.
That's a great point. And I think it's this model that we need to break out of, truly. I'm going to go back to the live audience Q&A just to address something that we didn't mention within COVID-19 and how it's affected our packaging and what businesses can and cannot do. So the question is that, are there actually any government or Manitoba health regulations right now saying that we can't be using having customers come in with their own reusable containers? Do we know whether that's the case? Joseph? Joseph, I think you're still muted. You might have to restart your answer.
There we go. Sorry. Yes, I was reading that chat there. So there's nothing that says that you can't bring in your jars, or as our store is closed right now because of we're not ready to serve customers because everything inside, it's still, we want to have our customers safe and we don't want to get fined for anything. So we're taking the steps to put things in place. So in the beginning, we didn't take our jars back from our customers because the store is closed and we wanted to wait until the pandemic is over. Once things started to slow down, our store is closed, but we allowed some of our retail locations like St. Leon, Vita Health, the stores that are already open that are willing to take jars back. Because our store is closed, we couldn't take it back because no one's at the door to open it. Where at the grocery stores, they will take it back and then we'll refund them the dollar to the grocery stores. So we put on our social media which stores will accept it. And another reason why we are not open yet is we launched an ice cream subscription, and we wanted to do this properly, where if we did open our store, we would lose focus on the subscription base. And I'm a strong believer in okay, the subscription delivery service saved our company when everything was down. And in the beginning, we were telling our customers, we're not accepting any jars right now until our staff are properly trained on how to take these jars back, how to re-clean them, what kind of heat treatment it needs, and what kind of sanitizing it needs as well. So once we had that in place, we now are returning jars with our subscribers that have jars. And anyone that is calling in our store, we're telling them where they can drop off their jars or get their refund for it. So as a government stand, no, nothing was in place where saying you're not allowed to take jars back. It was just on a company basis. We felt like we needed to first train our staff and get ourselves properly prepared when we do start accepting jars, which now is in place. And as of our store, it's still closed because a few factors. One, we said was a subscription. We wanted to make it the most user-friendly because we're having a lot of problems with programming. So that should be done soon, within the next month. Also, at the same time, we have big construction that's going on next door. And we felt like, okay, it's not really safe. It's not about really safe. It's not really appropriate for us to open at the same time, since we are generating a revenue from our subscribers. So we took it as we don't want to be greedy. We want it to be more serving our customers on our subscription basis better. And how do we do it better? Because this is going to stay for the next, I would say, year to two until we find a vaccine for the pandemic. So that's one of the reasons why our store is closed and why we didn't take jars in the beginning. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Joseph. I think to summarize, it sounds like it's doable, but there are many precautions that need to be taken to account for touch points from different people and proper sanitation.
Yes.
So that's where perhaps businesses are feeling hesitant to take that on right now, because it is a challenging feat and they're afraid of liabilities or potential ones that they could endure. I'm going to move on to some of the live questions in our Q&A. This one has been the most upvoted. So this is to all panelists. Are there any conscious changes you have made in your own life since becoming more aware of the negative impact of plastics on the environment? Brittany is ready to take the floor.
Sorry. I read that question. I was super excited to answer it, actually. So I looked at my life and I said, okay, I looked at my house. I figured, why don't I just go into one room in my house and see what I could do? So I went into my bathroom. That's a really big problem place. I looked at my garbage. I did an analysis of my garbage, and I was going through it and said, okay, what can I eliminate out of this to make myself more zero waste or zero waste if possible? And since last year, I barely touched my garbage bin. I've replaced all my shampoo with Lush, so bars specifically. I even go into Lush myself. I don't even ask for any packaging because I already have a tin that I can put it in, so I'm refusing any paper-based stuff as well. So this one's a little bit more, I think personal, but like female sanitary products, I've replaced mine, so I've not made any menstrual waste at all in an entire year, which is amazing because I've been doing it for a big chunk of my life and I've stopped, and it's amazing. I take any makeup products and I use TerraCycle. It's not a really commonly known thing, but you might see these boxes pop up at your workplace, at your school, at any organization really, if your organization is investing in TerraCycle. Essentially, you can get random boxes and it's specified to a certain product that you can put in there, and you ship it back to New Jersey and they recycle it into a new product. So we take all of our makeup products, deodorants, anything really, and we bring it back to La Comé in Polo Park, and they will take it for you and they send it off to New Jersey. And also I've replaced all my bathroom cleaning products with reusable stuff, so I've not made any cleaning bathroom product waste. Yeah. So that's something that I've done.
Awesome. Sarah, would you like to speak on what you've been doing to reduce your plastic waste?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of what Brittany mentioned, for sure, including the menstrual products, which are a total game changer, for sure. Also total cost reduction, which is amazing. But definitely, and recognizing that not everybody has access to stores that offer zero waste or unpackaged or bulk options, but that also has been a real game changer for groceries. Supporting farmers markets or bulk or zero waste establishments where possible. Also just consuming less, trying not to actually consume from stores, especially that don't offer more sustainable alternatives. And definitely over the years, I've gotten good at the DIY. So, I had eliminated quite a lot of packaging and excess plastic from my life, from, bathroom, kitchen, all of it. But there were certain things quite a number of years ago now, but that were still remaining. And the Tetra Pak with alternative milks was a big one. So making my own oat milk is a big one, and just trying to DIY when I can. That really helps to reduce. And then just finding substitutes, just sometimes saying goodbye to that product or, that certain snack, and looking at something that's similar, that's just as good, but, that you can get unpackaged. And that, is from a more sustainable and socially responsible source. That's what I try to focus on now.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. And I think a lot of folks don't realize just how easy it is to make some of those alternatives in terms of DIY. Like, you can throw together simple cleaning products with 3 ingredients and avoid all that excess plastic waste. So that's really great. I'm going to move on to our final question of the evening, just because I think this is the most important. So, in essence, to wrap up our discussion, what is a call to action, or several, that you'd like to leave our audience with tonight? And if you can make this to a Manitoba or Canada context, that would be great. Do we have somebody who's ready to discuss a call to action for the audience? Brittany, go ahead.
Okay, so for me personally, I do cleanups. It's really easy, guys. You go outside, you find a plastic bag. Sometimes I don't even I don't even use my own plastic bags. I find it on the street and I just use it and I put garbage in it. But you can call your MP, you can call your local business zone and ask if they're sorting or doing cleanup. And most oftentimes they are, or they participated in one and they can help you sort one out. You can even, if if you're going to school right now or if you're in a university, you can go to, they most likely either have like a sustainable office or you have like a counselor or someone. You can ask if you can sort out a cleanup. And that's my call to action.
Wonderful. Joseph, would you like to talk about your call to action?
You know, as a business, like, and as a consumers that want to do something in the environment, for us, we had the local high school come to us and say, hey, we want to do a cleanup in the whole area. Is there anything you can do for us? And I just said, listen, I can sell the product to all the students at cost. And like, we won't, from our part, we'll bring it a little bit less because I will donate my staff's time as well. And going to certain companies and saying such things, hey, we're willing to clean up the environment around your company or around this whole neighborhood. Is there anything you can do for us? And it encourages students, number one, encourages maybe neighborhoods to say, hey, such company is willing to do a discount on their product for this day if we clean everything. And approaching companies like myself or approaching other companies, I'm very positive that they're willing to do such things. And having the consumer or whoever's listening to encourage them, okay, how do I involve myself? How do I help the community? What other source than government? Because we always look at the government to do something. Is, okay, we're not asking for a free product. We're asking, we'll give you a service, and can you help us out and encouraging us to do this service? And having more companies involved like this will impact our community and impact what we do, like how the government sees us. If more of us do such things like this, I'm a strong believer in this. If I believe in this, I'm very certain that other companies believe it as well. So I know we have to ask government for help and for grants, but before going to the government and before going to the MP, just ask your local neighborhood, ask your local YMCA maybe, and then saying, hey, we want to organize a cleanup. And then having someone from this, I would hope it's a 20, 30, 40, 100 people that are willing to help approach certain businesses and see what kind of incentives they can give them to encourage them, because it's all about encouragement in the end. And for us, an example, we would love that. That's one of our values. We got to clean up our neighborhood. So if whoever approaches us, I would love that. And I'm 100% certain other companies would love it too.
That's great. Yeah, and I guess to add to what Joseph was saying is you can volunteer your time, and that goes from both sides, whether you're an individual or a business. You can make sure that you're putting a little bit of your time towards something that matters to you. And then also participating in such events, incentivizing them from a business perspective. I think that's really huge. And I have a feeling that while Brittany and Joseph were talking about things on the community level, Sarah might have a few calls to action that are on a grander, larger scale. So I'm going to pass the torch to Sarah to talk about her calls to action.
Thanks. Yeah, so there are lots of different ways that people can get involved. So it really depends on what your area of interest is, I would say. But you know, those that are really interested to see us move towards a federal ban can contact the federal government. We have an email to a group of decision makers that is hosted on our website. If you go to greenpeace.ca, you will find a way that you can send an email through our system. We've already had several thousand be sent, so it would be really great to have others send a note. And, you know, especially when it comes to bans, actually just recently an organization called Oceana put out a report, or not a report, but the results of a poll that showed that compared to last year, even, there's more public interest in moving towards a federal ban. So there's lots of momentum around this. You know we need to move in this direction. So that is one way that you can take action. Also, if you go to our website, you'll see that there's ways that you can also put pressure on Canada's major supermarket chains. So the big national chains, Loblaw, Empire, Sobeys, Metro, Walmart, Costco, you know, the big usual suspects, they have different stores. Many of them have stores operating in Manitoba and all across the country. And so by, you know, adding your voice to the call for those companies to reduce their plastic footprint and move towards more reuse, refill, bulk, unpackaged options for customers would be really great. And we also have a way to encourage some of the really big brands. So the ones that we see when we're doing the beach cleanups, the ones that, you know, we see overflowing the garbage cans and the recycling bins in our communities. We also have a call to action for them. So we call them the top 5 polluters. And those are the Tim Hortons, the Starbucks of the world. And so we also have a call to action focused on them. And then most recently, actually, we've narrowed in on Starbucks because many of you may have seen recently in the news that they have said that they won't allow their customers to bring their reusable cups back in, even though there are a lot of examples of contactless coffee and ways that people can keep using their own mugs. They've said, no, actually, we're still not going to allow customers to bring their own cups, and they've been quite public about that. So we have, currently we have a petition running in Canada, but it's actually a global petition because we're trying to get Starbucks globally to at least right now offer contactless coffee as they move towards actually creating a cup share model that they totally have the means, you know, and a great business model to actually have that type of a program succeed. So we're calling on them to do that. And so you can add your voice to that call to action as well. That would be really great. But we also, just one last plug is that we, globally, we do have actually a toolkit where it offers a bunch of different ways that you can get engaged on this issue. So everything from giving a presentation at your school or your business to engaging local companies, either a supermarket or cafe, or all different ways that you can engage, engaging local elected officials. It provides tools to help do that, to make it feel a little bit easier, and to also help connect you with like-minded folks who are also interested in how you can create your own campaigns. So all of that you can find on our website, but you know, there are so many different organizations that are doing amazing work to move us in the right direction and work towards a plastic-free future. So you know, there's lots of organizations through social media and otherwise that are offering ways to get engaged.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've got community action, we've got putting pressure on the policymakers or lawmakers, we've got putting pressure on the corporations who are responsible for a lot of this pollution. And then I do want to add a little plug for individual action as well. So with Plastic Free July being this month, July of course, you can take the challenge to assess perhaps room by room or just bit by bit, where do I use the plastic products? What products are potentially just single use and how can I swap that out for a reusable alternative? So I do encourage you to take action by taking on the Plastic Free Challenge this month and then seeing how that can gain momentum into different areas of your life. Now, Sarah, I will have you pass along the link so that folks can sign the petitions and have access to the letters. And I'll make sure that's distributed along with the recording of this webinar to everybody who registered. So I think the panelists have left us with a lot to think about, some really great actionable items and a few steps that we can take to fight towards a cleaner world. So I want to thank the panelists so much. Joseph, Brittany, and Sarah, thank you for sharing your knowledge today, and we really appreciate having your expertise here. And to the audience, thank you for tuning in or for watching this at a later date. Your response to this event is really outstanding. We had 159 people register for the screening and panel discussion, so I'm just really impressed by the number of people that are ready to learn more about the plastic crisis and start to make movement towards tackling it. So thank you so much. Take care, everybody. And for those whose questions didn't get answered, I apologize. We only had so much time today, but I really appreciate all the input. And thanks again, and happy Plastic Free July. Bye, everybody.
Bye.